Hello there. I was thinking about what was I thinking about? Yes. What advice I have for young people? There's a lot of young people in my subscribers. For those who don't know, um, my channel was viciously attacked by a wave of subscribers. Like 6 months ago. Vicious. It was a vicious onslaught. And anyway, that's a story for another time. And anyway, a lot of these people are young. So I was thinking, what kind of advice would I have to give? Because I'm an old. Can you see how old I am? I'm friggin' old. And back when I was a kid, I felt like there's no advice. It's not exactly true. But whatever. Moving on. And I don't have any advice right now for kids. But something I want to say is I think the world is extremely interesting. Yes, that is the deep thing that I want to share today. And this is something when you're a kid, you're kind of forced into this whole education system. It kind of sucks. It does. But some people enjoy it, but I think for most people it kind of sucks. The world's not perfect. The world's a complicated, very imperfect place. Look at that light on this frivolous nonsense. And the world's a complicated place. It's the opposite of perfect. And this bothered me a lot when I was a kid. These adults, they've had decades. Why don't they have their act together? Why aren't things better? There's a complicated answer to that, I guess. We're not going to get into it today. But the world's a complicated, very not perfect place. And there's this education system, which is relatively new, historically speaking, compulsory education. What it's been around for, I think it's been around for only like 100 years. Less than 150, I think. And that was another thing that bothered me. Like, they do this compulsory education system where you're forced to go to school and all that jazz. And they don't really explain it, or they don't tell you. Like, for me, I'm a very logical person, so if I were doing something, I would explain to people. Now, of course, it's like, well, their explanations are real basic. Like, well, you're a kid, and your education is important, blah, blah, blah. The thing is, like, there's these people who are, like, 20 who know nothing. Have you guys seen that? There's people who, they don't have to be 20. They could be any age, I guess, but the ones I see are in their early 20s, and they know like nothing. I mean, maybe they know about the Kardashians or something, but you ask them, they get asked they're Americans, and then they're asked, what country did the United States win its independence from? Stuff like that, To not know that is kind of crazy. They went through the education system, and they didn't learn anything. So it is what it is. We should not hold ourselves down to the lowest common denominator. There's always going to be some amount of people who just do not take an interest to anything, so whatever. But actually, the world is an interesting place, and but I think that education system sort of like it took things that are actually interesting and made them boring. That's kind of sad. It's not always true. I had some math teachers who were there was a genuine passion there. that you could feel, that I felt. And I had some English teachers. And you could have a teacher of any subject who has some kind of genuine passion. They're trying to share in some way, even though, a curriculum, no matter what the curriculum is, no matter what they're required to teach, there's interesting things in anything. I'd like to talk about physics and blah 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 stuff like that, but let me take an example of something I thought was really boring when I was a kid. One of the most boring things I thought is out there is plants. Just sounds boring. They're just sitting there, they're doing nothing all day, or it looks like that. They're just chilling all the time. They don't move except like really slowly over, as they grow. Actually, there are like, it's rare, but there is a plant that like moves, I think. Isn't there? It's like crawling along, but it's like over a period of days. I think there's like at least one. I could be mistaken. That's crazy if it's true though, right? A plant that's like moving along. I didn't know until I was in my 20s, randomly, that there's like these flying fish. There's these fish that have wings and like bounce off the surface of the ocean. When I saw that, I was like, what the heck? Nobody told me there was fish that have wings. Anyway, there's a lot of stuff like that over the years. I guess, with the internet the way it is these days, a lot of those interesting things, get fed to you in short form content or whatever. So there's that. But yeah, plants, I thought they were boring. I thought they were like the most uninteresting thing. There were all these other things I thought were interesting. Even I thought math was interesting. Philosophy, I thought, even though I don't know much about it. The way the world works. I wanted to understand how the world functions, how it works. Like, what are the gear mechanisms, turning in the system, in the world. Anyway, but plants I thought were boring. Until during the pandemic, I did some gardening, which, why I wanted to do it? Have you played the game Stardew Valley? That game made me want to do gardening. Stardew Valley, that's a good game. Anyway, so I had that desire that it was built over the years from playing some Stardew Valley. Good game. And I got to do real life Stardew Valley simulator a little bit. And during the pandemic. And here's the thing about plants, man. They are, there's like constant warfare going on. Do you realize that? Like, there's plants against insects, plants against fungi, fungi against insects, plants versus plants. They're all trying to kill each other all the time. Did you stop and think about that? And also, there's like a lot of the battlefield is taking place on the level of chemistry. Like the coffee plant. The reason there's caffeine, I believe I know of two reasons that caffeine exists. One, it's basically an insecticide, so it's a poison for insects, and it drops on the ground. It might also, a lot of plants, when you learn about them, they drop things on the ground that makes the ground inhospitable for other plants. Also, just the mulching, when the leaves fall, that layer of dead leaves makes it harder for smaller plants to grow. It blocks the sunlight. So it's like this natural mulching. Mulching, that's, if you do gardening, that's where you pile stuff up. Because there's always little weeds. There's little plants growing up everywhere. So if you just sort of cover the soil, if you have some plant that you want to grow, like a blueberry or something, you cover the soil around it with stuff like dead leaves or something, and then sunlight isn't getting through, and it helps stop weeds and stuff like that. It also makes the soil sort of damper. The soil will keep its water better, partly because of the shade, right? Because sunlight assists with the evaporation of water. Anyway, so kind of, I think plants kind of do that naturally. Anyway, the caffeine thing, I'm pretty sure it can kill insects. And apparently, with bees are super interesting, right? Bees sometimes consume there's nectar out there that has caffeine in it, and the bees will remember how they got there better. Like similar impact that it has on humans, I guess it has on the bees. I read that. Take it with a grain of salt. Don't believe everything you see on the internet just because some guy's saying it. So look it up if you want to know. Anyway, yeah, it's like this constant. I think of it as this constant warfare. Like, I think of it so differently than I did when I was a kid. Because when I was a kid, I thought plants, it's like this such a peaceful world that it's so boring, and it's like only old people like to garden and that kind of stuff. But gardening is like a sort of slow paced, relaxing thing. But you get to grow stuff, and for example, growing little herbs can help with your cooking. So these are admittedly things that maybe more that adults would take an interest in more often than kids. But yeah, and another thing is like the whole history of that stuff. So, and I'm just talking about one subject here. Again, I could blabber on about physics, math, sort of society, politics, whatever. But I chose specifically a topic that I thought was boring when I was a kid. And so the history of it is like, for example, there was a time when there wasn't much life on land, right? And then gradually plants, well, probably first there was the bacteria, single-celled organisms, the ocean had a lot of life, and things coming in from the ocean a bit, but at some point there were plants and animals on land. I can't remember if maybe plants were on land in large numbers first, but things like to eat plants, and so they protect themselves. And so that's why, trees are hard to eat. Have you noticed that? It's not easy. So they have a lot of things. Like the plant, the cell wall, first of all, is probably usually harder than the outside layer of the animal cell, which we don't call it wall, we call it the cell membrane. That's one thing. But I mean, the trees have this bark, so it's like this protective layer. And yeah, there's not a lot of things in the world that can eat trees. Some things can, termites, and some rare things that are out there, but also fungi, right? And so I guess for millions of years, maybe like 100 million years or hundreds of millions of years, something like that, there were trees growing on land, and nothing could eat the trees. It hadn't evolved yet. And so trees would grow, and then they die, and they would just pile up on top of each other. And so you would end up just like trees on top of trees on top of trees on top of trees, like many meters tall. Like maybe I don't know exactly, 30 meters, 100 meters, I don't know. But this enormous pile of dead trees that was just building up on top of each other, okay, stacking up. My understanding is that ended up being turning into like these oil reserves that you hear about. They're out there, and so over millions of years, that biomass breaks down and can become petroleum. And that's crazy. Just all these trees getting piled up. I mean, it's crazy to think about. And eventually, then fungi came into the picture and figured out how to eat eat that. And so that's why, like, if you see a tree stump, you know, a tree used to be there, but now it's I presume it's all dead. I don't know. Yeah, I don't think a tree stump would still be alive at all. And you have sometimes a little toadstool, a little mushroom growing out of that, because a lot of the dead wood gets eaten by fungi, and it takes a fair amount of time. And anyway, that's crazy stuff. Trees are hard to eat, and it's pretty interesting, pretty insane when you think about it. I wish I had better advice for you. I'll think. You little kids got any questions? You know, let me know. Comments, help my engagement. You know, smash that like button. Bye. Thanks. Bye. Trees are hard to eat. Bye.